Before I start a quick KL story, so for me the Kuala Lumpur is very special because it was actually the place where I became the Google developer expert, but I couldn't announce it because it was not yet, and it was only on the last day, and then I had to leave. So it's very nice for me to come back and like meet all the community and all the amazing people here in this nice city. Anyway, so what are we going to learn? So today we are going to speak about the Angular schematics. So first of all, please let me know who of you are actually like Angular developers. Okay, so it's Angular conference, most of you, that makes sense, cool. So who of you are actually using like the built-in Angular CLI schematics to generate components, services, and so on day-to-day job? Okay, quite some, that's cool, makes sense. It makes you like much more productive and like you don't have to type it yourself. Who of you is using custom Angular schematics like in your organization or open source project? 3, 4, okay, some. So not so many. So today we are going to also learn a little bit how to make custom schematics, and also maybe you know, maybe not, there will be a workshop today at 3:50 p.m. like for 50 people. I don't know if there are still some slots open, but if you are interested in the topic, we will learn hands-on how to build the custom Angular schematics, so feel free to join. Anyway, so we will gonna speak about what are Angular schematics, even though of course most of you know, so we'll go quickly through it. Then the benefits of using schematics, and we will go more in depth how can we use schematics like in maybe some non-standard ways, like setting default values for like repetition and stuff like this, or for multiple projects in a single CLI workspace. Then we will show how we can create custom Angular schematics. After that, we will show how we can use a powerful schematics templating engine, which makes it even more powerful. And how we are going to learn all of this? Well, with the live coding. So hopefully everything goes well because, yeah, the live coding can be sometimes funny. Anyway, so what is our setup? We have a console and we have an editor. So basically, whenever you are starting like some Angular project, you would usually do something like ng new, and you would say it's like my project, or something like this, and this would generate you an Angular CLI workspace with all like the necessary setup. So I already did that because like the npm install can take ages and the internet can be flaky. So basically what we have is we have pre-generated some workspace which is a empty Angular CLI workspace, so it doesn't have any application yet in it. That means like if we open the Angular JSON file, we see there is like an empty projects object. So now let's go into that. And let's say we want to make it useful, so we have to generate application first. So we say ng generate application. And now, like we know that schematics usually support like some options, but we don't remember what those options are, and we don't want to like go and read documentation. So what we can just do is say ---- help. And this should print us all the possible options, hopefully. What's up? I hope that the screen recording doesn't take so much power. So as you can see, these usually come up much faster. So when we want to do stuff and we don't know how to do it, we don't usually want to like now switch to browser, search the documentation, and maybe this documentation is outdated or stuff. So with the schematics, usually the documentation is part of the code itself, so it helps it stay up to date. So if we want to generate application, but we already have a pre-installed node modules, we can use a flag like skip install. So let's call it some app, and let's say skip install. And this is already using schematics because like ngg stands for ng generate. So this behind the scenes basically uses this default schematic collection, which comes with the Angular CLI. And as you can see, all these files were generated for us, so we don't have to think about, okay, how to set up this thing. Like we don't have to go like to some starter project. We don't have to copy it from like some company wiki or anything like this. It's all there for us. Now, if we have a look, so now what we got here, we already have an application in our workspace, so we can see it here that we have this project some app, and we also set it as a default project. But maybe you are aware that Angular CLI now enables us also to have multiple projects in a single repository, so you can say ng generate library, and let's call it some lib, and again, like let's say skip install. And this will create another project in our workspace, hopefully, right? So if you have a look now, in the projects we have some app and some lib, and in the Angular JSON we have also two different projects. And now we see like the default project is some app. So what does that mean? Now, if we try to generate component, let's call it some view, we would see that this will get generated in the default application. Oh, NGGC, right. So this will get generated in the default project, which is some app. So the question is how we can generate stuff. So you can see here there's some app. So how can we actually generate stuff into different project in the single workspace? So the answer to that is we can use the project flag, and here we can specify that it's some lib. And now what's going to happen is that this component will be generated in the lib project. But as you can see, like it's generated like with the CSS. So and maybe you want to use Sass because you want to use Angular material, so you want to have all your styles with the Sass. So one way to do it is if we generate some other component, we can just specify here like style SCSS, and the generated file will be SCSS instead of CSS. But this can be like pretty annoying to do this like for, oh, pardon. Of course, it's the wrong one. It's the some view other, like this. So this can be pretty annoying if you want to do it like for every generated component. So there is a way actually to specify the defaults. So let's have a look. Let's say for the sum app, like every component we want to generate, we want it to be SCSS. So there is a way to do this. As you can see here, there is this schematic field, and we can go inside of it and do with the code completion, and we get like the schematics for component. And here we can say style SCSS. And now, when we just generate it again, without anything, we will see that the generated file will be SCSS, even though I didn't have to specify anything. So all these options which are provided for all these schematics, so like inline templates and like flat and whatever, oh, it didn't work. They can be specified as a defaults. Also, if you have a multiple projects and you don't want to specify like the defaults per project, you can also do it like on the top level. So you can say schematics, and again for component, style SCSS. Right. So what about knowing like what are the available schematics? So there is this other command called schematics. So instead of ng-generate, you can do schematics, and you can say list schematics. This schematics command comes like if you install like the Schematics CLI. I will show that later. And as you can see, by default, there are only two ones, which are like really the most global ones. They are like about generating the custom schematics project, which we will use a bit later. But let's say we want to know what is provided in the Angular by default. So to do that, we have to specify like the schematic package, which is schematics/Angular, and put a colon. And what we are going to see is that those are all the available ones in the Angular CLI by default. So now what would happen if we wanted to use, let's say, Angular material? So that's like because those are like the default schematics, but there are like many third-party libraries like Angular material or NGRX, and they also come like with the schematic support. So they also enable us to generate like the entities and and automate like the setup work. So let's try that out. Let's add Angular material. And as you can see, I'm not saying npm install, but I'm saying ng-add. And this means that this will run the ng-add schematics of that package. And this you can also do like for your own company library. So let's say you are working like for a big enterprise company and you have like multiple teams and multiple projects and like hundreds of developers. Maybe you are using your own custom like component framework. Maybe you are using your own data access libraries or stuff like this. And again, you have like kind of two options. You either can put it somewhere in the Git repo and write some documentation, or you can automate it using schematics so that your colleague can just do like ng-add my company/components and it will work for them. So let's see what's doing the Angular material. So as we've seen before, like the schematics, they support passing in some options. So we can say like whatever style CSS or skip install. And Angular material would support such an option called theme. But we didn't provide any theme, and it's a required option. So instead of failing, we got here like a selection where we can say what kind of theme we want to use. This feature is called like Schematics Prompt, which makes it even more user-friendly because people, even though there are like required options, they don't have to pre-read the documentation. Schematics will just ask them. So that's very nice. So we say it's custom. I chose the white like a light theme because of the light, and I see now this is very hard to read. So basically what it says is if you want to set up Hammer.js, and we say no, And now it asks us if we want to set up a browser animation, and we say yes. So all those three were like kind of like mandatory options, and we didn't have to provide them like, or a user didn't have to read the documentation and know that he needs to provide them, but we could have asked them. So now we are installing this third-party package, which is like Angular Material, which we know it comes also with its own schematics. But how can we run these schematics in place of the default one? So let's say we want to generate the navigation and not the component. So we will show that very shortly. Right, so internet is not so bad after all. All right, so this was installed. Now it will actually change the files. So as you can see, the schematics right here is that it created a custom theme file, and besides that, it made some changes to Angular JSON and index and style CSS. So let's have a quick look. In the app, in the index, we see that the 2 font imports were added, and also we see that all this big setup of custom theme with comments how to adjust it even further was added. So that's another thing which we don't have to document, which we don't have to add to some wiki, and people can just be like productive out of the box. Also with your own organization, libraries of components or data access or whatever that is. Right. Okay, so that's too much. All right. So there we have it, and now the question was, so we want to know what schematics are provided in this third-party library. So to do that, we can do again schematics, command and list schematics, but now we have to provide another package name, which is Angular/material. And then we will see that again there is like some things which we can generate. So for example, like we can generate navigation, tree, table, and so on. And again, if you don't want to read the docs, what we can just do is ng generate, but now because it's a third-party library, we have to specify like which library that is. So we have to say Angular/material, and the separator is the colon, and then we say we want the nav, and we can say help. And what we should get is the info again, right? So we can see we have to specify the name of the component and like many similar options as with the normal components, so like prefix and stuff. Right, so that's nice. Now, whenever we would like to, let's say we are using NGRX and we generate like a lot of actions and reducers and stuff like this. So we don't want to maybe always specify like the name of the package. So how can we set like the default collection so that we don't have to specify it? So again, in the Angular JSON, there is the property for that. So if you have a look here, let's collapse this. So as we specify the defaults for the schematics themselves, what we can also specify is the default schematics collection. We can say that it's Angular/material. And now, if it was set up correctly, hopefully, we should be able to just say like ngg now, some now. Let's see if that works. And it does. So that's the way. So if you keep using like some schematic collection more often than the other, you can just set it as a default in your Angular JSON and again like save yourself some typing. So I hope you see like that the schematics can be like very useful and can make you very productive. More so, they can also help your colleagues, mostly in the big organizations, because in the small ones, of course, if you have one project, that it's not really worth it. But if it's like at least 2, 3, 5 teams and like a couple of applications, and you keep like repeating like the same pattern over and over again, and you have like some custom setup in your in terms of how you set up those libraries, then it can be pretty useful how to use schematics. So now we will explore a little bit how can we generate or create our own custom schematics in our organization. So to do schematics, we will surprisingly use schematics again. So as we've seen before, there is this schematics command. So we can run this also outside of the Angular repository. So it's kind of different than the ng generate. To get that command available in your environment, you have to do npm install -g at Angular devkit. Devkit / schematics CLI. I will not install it because I already pre-installed it. And if you install it, you get this schematics command. And as we showed previously, if you list schematics, the default ones are called blank and schematic. And those are the schematics which will generate you a schematic project. So it's kind of like ng-new, but for the schematics. So let's do that. So we would say schematics blank as an empty project, and we will call it like hello. But again, I already pre-did that because I wanted to skip the install time. So what we will get is this hello folder. And on the first look, it looks kind of like a normal Node JavaScript project. So it has a package.json, and inside of that package.json, we have like some build script and test script and some dependencies. But what is new is this schematic field here, which points to source collection.json. And this is kind of like the heart of the schematic package, where you have to list all the schematics which are available. So that's in the if we compare it like with the default collection, so in this default collection of Angular CLI, this would be the file where you would see like stuff like components, service, application, library. So for us, it's just the hello schematics, and let's change the description. So it's like generate hello component, right? So and as you can see, like it references here the factory, which goes into hello folder, index file, and the hello function. So the hello function is a factory function which returns us the rule, and the rule is this thing here, which is the schematic itself. So the options which we receive is exactly the same options which we were using before, like skip, install, or style. So it enables us to parameterize the execution of our schematic. And then the schematic itself is a function which accepts the tree and the schematic context. This tree thing is very interesting and cool because it represents like a virtual representation of the files in your project. So it's kind of like when the React has a virtual DOM, so it doesn't do the changes to the real DOM, but first to the virtual DOM, and once you are finished, then it kind of commits it to the real DOM. This is very similar concept. So first you are changing the files just like in the memory, in the virtual representation, and once it's done, then you kind of commit it to the file system. So the cool thing about this is it makes it much faster. Another cool thing is that it simplifies testing a lot because you can generate like the whole Angular workspace with the many applications in it like in no time. So you actually can test your schematics against the real setup. The third thing is it enables us to define like what kind of merge strategies we would like to use. So that means, let's say you have like some complicated schematics which change a lot of files and something goes wrong. You can specify that the stuff will be really committed in your file system if everything was successful. So you can prevent like some corruption, and then you don't need to do like a git revert or something like this. All right, so we have a schematics. Now this is a TypeScript, so we kind of have to build it to run it because we can only run JavaScript. So let's add here a new goal. Build watch, so we can build this in the background. So it will always rebuild when we do some changes. And let's run it here. So let's enter the project. That's the workspace. So let's go out. Let's go to hello and run npm run build watch. Right. So this should start, and the compilation should be successful. And whenever we make like some changes, then it will update the code. All right, so this works. Now, we already have some schematics. They don't do much. They just return back the tree. So let's try to run them. So to do that, we have to go again into our project. It's called hello. And now, again, we cannot use ng-generate because we are not in Angular CLI workspace, but we can use schematics. And now we have to specify the package name as previously, but we can actually use the relative path because the current folder is the package. So we can say dot. And then we can say hello, which is the name of the schematic itself. So that's like a component or service. And now when we run this, it will say nothing to be done, which is correct because we just get the tree and we return the tree back without doing any changes. So let's try to generate something. So here we have a tree, and with the code completion, we see that the tree has this method create. So what we can do is create a hello.js with the following content. Console log, let's say, hello ngmi, right? Let's put a semicolon. Now, let's try to run this again. And you will see it already says create hello.js. But now, if we try to list the files, we will not see it. The reason for that is that our package is now specified as a relative path, so the dot. That means schematics automatically run in the development mode, which runs like with the dry run, so it actually doesn't do changes to prevent us from damaging something. So to actually generate a file in the development mode, we have to say dry run is false. Now, it will again say that the hello.js was created, and now when we try to run it, we can say just like node hello.js, and we will see hello ngmi. Great, so we are generating some files. Now, what about the options? So as we've seen before, we can pass some options into schematics, right? So let's first prepare it and put here console log so that we see what kind of options we are passing in. So we say run schematics with options, and we just log the options out. Right. Let's delete the generated. Oh, pardon. Let's delete the generated file. So now if we do this again, and let's try to pass in some options. So for example, like name, which is ngmi, and like A, B, C, 1, 2, 3. And now we will see that in the console output that those are the options which we passed in. So let's use the name option to parameterize the file which we are generating. So to do that, we just, okay, let's format it a bit nicer. What we can use is these options and put it here. So we can say options name. Okay, why is this red? What? Okay, I'm blind. Just a sec. No, it's, I guess it's correct, it's just the editor. So options name. So let's see, seems to be compiling. Now, let's try this. So ngmi so that we see some difference. And we have to delete the file. Okay. And it works. So we are passing now the options to the generated file. But as we've seen before, like schematics is all about the convenience, so we always want to make sure that our users like get the necessary info, so like they get the help. So to do that, we have to specify something called schema. So let's create a schema.d.ts file where we can export interface called hello options, and this will have a name property of type string. And we can use that inside of here, so we can say that options are not any, but it's hello options, which gets imported automatically. And besides that, we have to also create another file, which is called schema.json. This file has to be referenced from the collection. So we say here, schema is in hello/schema.json. And this file is a bit long, so I will copy it because we have a very little time. So let's do this. And let's have a look. So first of all, we see the ID hello schematics, okay, title, hello options, schema, description, say hello to someone. But what's the most important is we say that there is a required property name and that that property name has to be of type string. And another thing we say is that we don't have to say minus name and the name, but we also say that the first argument on the 0th position, so the first argument will be taken as a name. So let's try that out now. Let's delete this file. So if we generate this again and don't provide anything, what's going to happen? It will give us a user-friendly error which says that the input doesn't validate against the schema and that there is a required property name. So that's kind of nice. And if we use it now like with the positional argument, then it will work again. But it can get even better because as we seen previously, like stuff like Angular material comes like with these prompts which actually prompt user if he didn't provide it some option which is mandatory. So how can we make that happen is by adding this one line here. It's called xprompt, and there is the question which will be printed to the user in console if he didn't provide it that required option. So let's try that again. All right, so let's do this. And as you, yeah, it's unfortunately is white, but let's maybe. So what it says is like, what is the name of the person you want to greet? And now you can say NG Malaysia. And now let's run it. So, and this works. So besides that, yeah, I think like we had a bit struggle like with the setup initially, so there is not much time left. So there are like multiple other topics like schematics templating and then like ng-add and so on, which we'll explore in the workshop like in the afternoon. But now I think we have to wrap things up. So yeah. What did we learn? So we show how we can generate like Angular CLI workspace, which is like with the help of the default schematics which come from Angular CLI, which helps us to scaffold stuff very fast, how to generate applications and libraries inside of the Angular CLI workspace, and we spoke about the potential use cases for the custom schematics, so stuff like automating setup of your custom component libraries in your organization or data access, or even if you use if you are developing some open source library, you can get users more up to speed if you provide some schematics. Then we show how we can specify schematics defaults in Angular CLI workspace to not repeat ourselves in terms of options. Then we show how we can execute the particular schematics for a specific project in Angular CLI workspace, because nowadays they support monorepo style of development, so this is kind of important. After that, we show how we can use the Schematics CLI, so that's this schematic command which enables us to list all the available schematics and also generate the custom schematics project. Then we explored how we can run custom schematics in the current folder with the relative path, and spoke about the schematic concepts like rule, tree, and options. After that, we implemented a simple schematic which says hello to somebody, and we even passed in options which were validated with the schema. We unfortunately didn't have time for schematic templates, but it's something which we can explore at the workshop. So the workshop will start at 15:50 at LT8. I don't know yet where it is, but hopefully we can find it. So feel free to join if there are still some spaces left. Besides that, there is very good official documentation which is pretty recent. So the pull request was merged maybe a month and a half ago. So there is now an official schematics documentation on the Angular IO website, which is very useful. Besides that, you might be interested in a real-world example of how to use custom schematics in an open source project. So I created stuff called Angular extension/model, which basically is a simple state management library and uses ng-add and also generates a model services. So that's a real-world example how you can integrate schematics into your library. After that, you might be interested also in the two blog posts with this topic. So one is the productivity tips, which goes more into this customization of the Angular CLI configuration, and the in-depth guide to custom schematics, so which is basically what we spoke about today, but more in detail and further steps. So feel free to get in touch. You can install me with npx Tomas Trajan, and you will get all the links in your console. Depending on how good your console is, you could also probably click on those links. So feel free to do that. And thank you for your attention.